I'll call the meeting to order. This is the Public Safety Local Income Tax Committee of the Monroe County Local Income Tax Council. It's Friday, August 13th, 2021, 11 a.m. We're conducting this meeting via Zoom due to the restrictions on the pandemic. And I'll ask Mr. Lucas if you will call the roll.
Sure, my pleasure. Committee member Smith.
Here.
McKim.
Here.
Munson.
Here.
Piedmont Smith.
Here.
Sims.
Here.
Scambaluri.
Here.
And Purcell.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. An agenda summation is that we're going to discuss recommendations to Monroe County Local Income Tax Council rates, allocations, and distributions of PS Lit revenues for 2022. We have 4 items on it: presentation of the lit rates and revenues, and then we'll accept a motion, and then we'll talk about the remaining revenues and how they're distributed, and we'll accept the motion on that. We'll take some public comment during the meeting, and that will probably be our business for today. So if we can, let's dive right in to item A on our agenda: presentation of estimated public safety lit rates and revenues. And who will present that? Are you going to present that, Mr. Lucas?
I'm happy to. If either Mike Rick or Jennifer Lloyd has anything to add, they're welcome to chime in. But in your packet, you all should have received a estimated distribution report that the state DLGF provided. It lists estimates for all of the counties in Indiana. I highlighted Monroe counties, and the relevant figure for you all is the amount for the public safety portion of the lit. And the August estimate came in at $9,025,682. So that's on, I believe, the second page of that 5-page report you all received in the packet. It's also reflected in the table, the last page of your packet, that included the PS Lit distribution history. So if you'll give me just a moment, I'll display this just briefly.
Thank you.
Are you all able to see the spreadsheet?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
So this revenue estimate here, $9,025,682. Again, this is the estimate that the state provided, and this figure may change. This is an estimate that they provide in early August. The final amount won't be known until later in the year, and this figure in the past has and can change. So that's what we have to work from at the moment. Mike or Jennifer, I don't know if you have anything to add. I believe it's November when the state issues the final certified amounts that the counties receive. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And before we, I guess, move on, I will just explain this is the total revenue estimate. What you all hear today will need to decide from that total revenue amount. The dispatch center has received funding each year that comes off of the top before the remaining amount is then divided according to a state formula among the 4 units of government: the county, the city of Bloomington, town of Ellettsville, and town of Steinsville. So from this total amount, you'll hear from Amy Hensley on how much the dispatch center is requesting for their budget. And then the remaining amount will be distributed in certified shares to those 4 units of government. So happy to answer any questions. This should be something you all have seen in the past. So,
committee members, do you have any questions or discussion at this point? Mr. McKim?
Yes, I just kind of wanted to note that this number that we just received from the state represents about a 5% decrease from 2021 that we received in 2022. It's, you know, I guess the way I look at it is not too bad for a pandemic economy. This represents primarily income earned in the year 2020. It's the tax return. It's basically tax returns that have been filed from September 1st, 2020 to June 30th of 2021. You'll notice that that's a 10-month period rather than a 12-month period as it normally is, because the previous tax return collection period was extended to 14 months. So that to some degree there might have been some revenue from tax returns that probably should have been in this year that actually were received last year. So, you know, in a way, last year we saw about a 9% increase. This year we saw about a 5% decrease. So, you know, even smoothing that out a little bit, and assuming that there are some of those returns that probably should have been this year had we had normal 12-month periods. Even though, you know, obviously an increase would have been better than a decrease, that's not too bad given that substantial portions of the economy were shut down during part of 2020. That's just kind of my gloss on those numbers.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. That's an important fact. It's not too bad for coming out of a pandemic. Any other committee members wish to comment or ask a question before we move on to Ms. Hemsley to tell us about the dispatch? We good? Okay. Well, then I guess if Central Dispatch wishes to talk about the tax revenues and tax rate and their request, that would be great. Go ahead. Go for it, Amy. I think you're, can't hear you.
How's that?
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
So from the spreadsheet you see that was provided that shows our 2022 request, you'll see the biggest increase is in the staffing. We are following the NOVAC report, and it was based on not only our call volume, but also on the changes in the environment, the amount of runs that we cover. And the NOVAC report had recommended 9.5 FTEs above what we had in the year that they did that. So last year we increased by 3.5, and it was on a 3-year plan. So this year we plan to increase by 3 and next year by 3, which will bring us up to the recommended level by the NOVAC report. So that is one of the big differences you see in the salaries. The other big difference you see in the salaries is that when we looked at salaries around the state and we looked at staffing levels and how do we retain who we've got and recruit better who would make a good dispatcher, we noticed that other people who had a better retention rate were paying considerably higher than we were. So we did a comparison and found that salaries needed to be brought up about 9% to be comparable with other people around us that had good retention rates. And so part of what you see in that increase amount is a salary increase of 9% for across the board. And also with our increased staffing, we were hoping to, as we are working along, one of the things we're hoping is to lower our overtime, but with increased staffing and more people and more slots, that overtime, I think we'll be doing good if we can keep the overtime rate about the same of what we've spent in the past. This year, we are down in our overtime rate a little bit, but I think our overtime will be comparable to what you see in 18 and 19, possibly 20. So that's why it has gone up some. The other increases in the FICA and the health insurance is just based on more individuals in our staffing. The other changes you're going to see is in the 5240 other supplies line. We had used amounts that we did not need in that line to transfer to shortfalls in our building repairs. And so for the 2022, what I've done is I've just automatically taken it out and put it in the account where we needed it to start with, so that for better tracking purposes, we see where money is going and we can keep better track of that. In our capital line, one of the things that we ran into with COVID and just different things that we're seeing all together, 2 portable 911 systems, which are called Vesta command positions. They would be a command position that if our building was compromised or if we needed to do any major repair that was noisy. We had one time where we had to evacuate and disinfect because of COVID. And for those circumstances, having 2 Vesta command positions or mobile 911 call taking positions would be critical. And so I have 64,000 for 2 Vesta commands in our capital equipment. We have a mutual aid agreement with IU, and they let us come over there, but they only have anywhere from 1 to 2 positions to give us for call taking. And with the need of our center, that's not enough. So if for any reason we are having to close our center or relocate temporarily, the 2 Vesta commands are going to be critical for us. And we would be able to set those up anywhere that there is internet capability through the city VPN. The other capital equipment that I've put in for is $15,600 for replacement portable radios. The Vesta command that I described is a call taking position and would give us call taking in CAD alone, but would not give us the ability to talk to our responders out in the field. So we rely heavily when we do have to make changes like that, or if for some reason our radio system is in need of work and repairs, we rely heavily on a small set of portables. And with some of the changes the state is making and the age of our current portables, we're going to be in need of replacing some of those. This won't replace all of them, but this gives us a real good start, and we'll replace our oldest ones. Other than that, the remaining capital request is for headsets and it's TDMA software upgrade, which is a necessary upgrade to our radio software based on changes the state is making that will require us to make that change as well. And that was the main thing I had. We've increased the contractual a little bit in the communications contract. And part of that is because we're picking up a rave feature and we've had increased fiber costs.
All right. Committee members, do you have questions or discussions that you would like to chat with Amy on? Mr. Sims?
Thank you, Chair Smith. Ms. Hensley, thank you for that report. I guess the one question I do have, well, I may have more, but with regard to retention, and you said in comparison, with other entities, we need about a 9% increase. And that's fairly understandable. I guess my question is, have you identified any other factors with retention other than salary?
The the call volume is very heavy on the dispatchers right now. And it's kind of a domino effect or a cycle. And that is when we lose people, then the number of calls distributed among less people make a much higher call volume. So if we can increase salaries, get more here and keep them here. And if people are making a better income, it makes them a little more patient with the workload that they carry. And so if we can retain them, then through offering them better salaries, the outcome of that is that with more people, the call volume per person is less.
Okay, thank you. And I have one follow-up, if I may, Chair Smith.
Please do.
Ms. Hensley, when you did a comparison, and I'm assuming that's a regional comparison, can you share with us the areas that we were compared with? Is that contiguous counties, for an example?
We looked at contiguous counties. We also looked at counties that had similar call volumes. A lot of them had a minimum of 5 and a supervisor in the room at all times. We have a minimum right now of 4 and a supervisor in the room part of the time. So following the Novak report, as I did the investigation into some of that, I found that the Novak report was right on target with where we needed to be heading and what their recommendations were. So I looked at Clark County. They had a similar call volume. I looked at Morgan County. They had a lot lower call volume, but they are contiguous. I looked at the other counties around us. I mean, I can pull up that comparison.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay.
That's something we can talk about later. I just wanted to get an idea of the process. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. McKim?
I believe Ms. Piedmont Smith was first.
So sorry, Isabel. Please go ahead, Isabel.
No problem. So I just wanted to know, what is the average salary of a dispatch employee?
Average? Right now, I'm not sure what the average is. Right now, our base is at $39,800. And I found out that Morgan County's base right now is like $43,300. So for a short drive, that's not much difference. They have a lot lower call volume. They have 5 or 6 in the room at all time, even with a lower call volume and a working supervisor. So that was one of the major factors, that I talked to them at great lengths. And I also found that in the last 3 years, they've only lost 2 dispatchers. One didn't make it through the training process, and one had always wanted to be an officer on the street and was able to acquire one of the open street positions. So they did not, even though they lost them as a dispatcher, since they stayed in that department and field, they didn't feel like that was a loss, but they did lose 2 dispatchers in 3 years.
So it sounds like the 9% increase is exactly what we need to bring us up to Morgan County.
It's a real good start. That brings us up to, I think, $43,050 for a base. So.
Okay, good. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Piedmont Smith. Mr. McKim?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, we have the same issue with losing sheriff's deputies to Morgan County as well. The salaries are better, the workload is less. Actually, I have 2 kind of very different questions. I wanted to follow up on the turnover issue, and I'm just wondering, does the city do any kind of exit interviews with employees who leave? Do we know that it's only the salary? Could there be other reasons why employees might be?
They offer one. I don't think they're required to fill it out, but they do offer one.
And has there been any information provided in any of those forms that might lead to the reasons why they leave? Is it always just to take a higher paid position in another jurisdiction?
Sometimes it's a career increase, like from supervisor to center training officer, or something to that effect. They go for, a career advancement. Sometimes it's salary, sometimes it's the stress of the job, and they just get burnt out and leave, and they look for something totally different. Some of who we have been lost either shortly after we hired them, or we've hired them and then they never get in the door because everybody everywhere is shorthanded and trying to retain people. And so what we found is sometimes people would leave and come to us, and then their old employer would contact them and say, if I gave you this job and an extra $10,000, would you come back? And we've lost people like that.
Thanks. And I guess the other question I had to do more with the capital. And I think that the capital expenditures that you're proposing are certainly justified. I don't have any problem with that. I'm just wondering if there are, my understanding is that the reversions at the end of the year get put into some kind of fund that's restricted for use on capital items for the dispatch center. I'm just wondering if we have any of those reversions available for use for the capital items rather than new public safety lit money.
One of the things that we talked about in a meeting yesterday with some city and county people was coming up with a 10-year capital plan to see exactly what we are going to be looking at on a 10-year projection. And they have tasked me with starting to put that together and then meeting again in October to look at some of that. Beyond that, I can't answer that question. Mr.
Yeah, and I understand. It's more on that's a question more on the controller's office side. That's I understand you're focused on the budgeting, on the purchase side. You need what you need to run the dispatch center. So I guess my question is more of a finance question. I believe that there are unspent appropriations from past years that could be used on this on these capital items for interlocal. And so I would like, if possible, if the attorneys could, maybe city and county attorneys could get together and find out from the controller's office and our auditor's office if there are any unspent appropriations. So I'll be supporting this budget in the committee, but before we vote on it on county council, I would definitely like to see if there's somewhere else we could get those capital items from. Thank you.
Do we have any response from anybody from the city for Mr. McKim's query?
Or the county?
Or the county. Sure.
This is Margie Rice. I can address that. I think that we should definitely ask the city controller to provide some information, some financial information. It seems to me that we have been having surpluses and that they go into, sort of a fund. And I believe that there have been a lot, surpluses every year that have been going into this fund, and that Jeff's instinct is right. There's probably money there for that. But I think we're going to need some numbers from the city controller's office to figure that out. So if you guys can get that information to us, we will definitely, I can reach out to Mike Rooker and we can work on that.
This is Mike Rooker. Sorry about that, city attorney. I had to step away for just a minute, and so I didn't hear the crux of the question there. I'm sorry, Jeff.
Jeff, would you like to ask that question to Mr. Rooker?
Sure. The crux of the issue is on the capital items. I'm wondering if there aren't reversions from past years where I know we've run a surplus, and by the interlocal, I believe that money is supposed to go into a fund that's then restricted to capital items for the dispatch center. I would like to see if there's any past reversions that could be used to fund the capital items on this budget rather than new PS lit money.
And I do want to just comment real quick, and Margie may be able to jump in, although yesterday a number of folks from the city met, and Amy was on that call as well, met with Jeff Cockrell and Angie Purdy and Kim, oh my goodness, what is Kim's name? Kim Shell from the county to talk about that precise issue. And we had sort of, what we had discussed doing, and Margie, please feel free to jump in from the county side on this. What we had discussed doing is setting aside or trying to establish something like a 10-year capital plan. I don't know why I say something like, but a 10-year capital plan to look at what capital expenditures dispatch may have in the future and to use that sort of as a guidepost for what level of reserves are appropriate for those future capital expenditures. And then if we do have significant reserves, and I think we have a healthy reserve for dispatch funds, to look at during this process next year, whether or not using those reserves for things like capital expenditures to see a reduced rate potentially for a year or something like that would make sense. But we might be a little bit rushed to get all of that organized and to come up with that figure during this process for the 2022 budget. So we had thought about doing that as part of next year's process for the 2023 dispatch budget, if that makes sense.
Hey, Mike, do you know what is the amount of money in reserve right now?
So when we combined the three pools of reserve funds, and we have a range because there was some disagreement about the numbers not disagreement so much as we just need to sit down and work through the precise number. But the range in the PS lit PSAP funds held by the county, PS lit PSAP funds held by the city, and then E911 funds was between $2.5 and $3.1 million is the range we talked about yesterday. So.
Okay, so that, yes, very healthy reserves.
Yes,
yeah.
And that would also give us time to make sure we figure out, work through the differences we're having in computing those figures as well. So
yeah, and let me and I think to Jeff's point, and not that everybody shares this perspective, but I think that there's a perspective out there that feels like we are overfunding, or in the past few years, we have overfunded dispatch and growing those reserves. And so that we need to get the budget adjusted so that we're not putting too much in reserves. Because to the extent that we do that, that means less money for BPD or less money for county sheriff. And we want to make sure we just get the numbers right, that the budgets are appropriate and we're not overfunding any particular budget.
And I'm glad to hear that effort is ongoing, because it is actually my belief also that the dispatch center is being overfunded. And by that, I want to make it very clear. I don't mean that they are requesting or spending too much money. What I mean is that I think there is more cash that is being put in there that is not being budgeted or spent. So that's not at all on the criticism of the operations side. It's entirely a comment about the financing side.
Yes, I agree. I think everybody feels like dispatch is running well, is running smoothly, but that we just might not have the numbers right. And we're unwittingly putting too much money in reserves.
Precisely.
Very good. Mr. Sims?
Thank you. And I appreciate Ms. Hensley again speaking on the 10-year plan for capital outlays and how to maybe use that. I guess my more direct question is, we're talking about healthy reserves. So who determines what a healthy reserve is? Is that us, or is that the Department of Local Government Finance, or who determines that?
I think that's the dispatch policy board.
Yeah, so just to jump in with what we talked about yesterday, we would want to have Ms. Hensley and her staff take a look at what their capital needs may be over the next decade. Then maybe to sit down with a working group from the city and the county to review sort of what she produces. And then once we sort of have a document that makes sense to all of us, we would bring that to the policy board to say, look, this is what we think makes sense as a 10-year capital plan. Have the policy board look at it, review it, potentially revise it as they see fit. And then we would have something to guide this committee when we're talking about what reserves, maintaining what level of reserves makes sense for capital expenditures going forward. The problem is just this body has some strict statutory timelines by which they have to modify the rates here. And it's just going to be difficult to get all of that done before we bump up to those deadlines for the 2022 budget. So, I think this makes perfect sense to be talking about next year when we have a bit more time to work through it all.
Okay, and lastly, if I may,
Go ahead.
It sounds like we have decent reserves, at least so far. But moving forward, if in fact whatever we determine is a healthy reserve level, and if it drops below that, would part of this PS Lit committee's process be to contribute funds to bring that amount, whatever it's decided it is, back up to that level from a funding standpoint? So I don't know that's long term, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around that, if that made sense. I mean, it's hard to answer because we haven't determined what a healthy reserve is at this point. But I'm thinking in the next 10 years, how, is that something that happens? Similar to maybe a rainy day fund. I mean, it's not the same, but similar to that.
Yeah, Margie, I don't know if you want to jump in here too, but I don't know. We'll just have to see what sort of capital expenditures are anticipated. I think we are thinking, or the parties are thinking right now, that the current reserves are probably adequate. So the idea would be that we wouldn't need quite as much as we have, but we don't know that until we see what Amy produces and then take that to the policy board. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think Mike's exactly right on the process. Remember that there are two boards. We have a director, Amy, and then there are two boards that the interlocal sets up. One is the police chief and the sheriff, knowing that the city has the sort of the day-to-day operational duties, but the sheriff and the police chief are supposed to work together on sort of, they alone are a committee. And then there's the policy board. They look at the budget before it comes, and the interlocal says that budget has to go to the city council and the county council. So, what I think needs to be done that hasn't been done in the past is that we prioritize this conversation about the reserves, because I know we talked about this last year. And I think that we just need to really prioritize getting those numbers right so that next year, if we don't have time to do it this year, that next year we aren't having this conversation again.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly right too. And I'm sorry, just to respond to that point, I think Ms. Hensley, we were talking about trying to have the quote unquote working group look at your report sometime in mid-October, once we get through some other significant legislative items we have coming up, budget and some other things. So
That's correct.
And if I can jump in there, I'm going to ask the question is, if the working group gets together and has a 10-year plan and develops something, would the working group ask to do a presentation or an explanation of the plan to the PS Lit committee prior to next year?
I mean, Margie, you can jump in and offer your opinion. I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that.
I think we should. I think that's an excellent idea, because if we don't, everybody is so busy. The fact of the matter is, if we don't make it a priority and say we're going to do a report at this certain time, we're going to end up, it's going to 9 months are going to pass, and then we're going to be like, uh-oh, here we are again at budget time. So I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, and just to say, though, not to burst anybody's bubble, but we would anticipate going to the policy board first, since they're the subject matter experts on all things dispatch related, before we would come to this committee. So.
Yeah, that's right. And it could even be they could meet, and we could invite the city council and county council to participate. There are a lot of ways we could do it, but yes, I think we don't want to wait until next spring to be
right. We don't want a surprise, right?
Exactly. And again, I think things are going well. I think we have great leadership. I think it's just a matter of everybody's super busy.
Yep. Okay, Miss Scambaluri, would you like to?
And Ms. Munson also has.
It's hard to see on a light background, but Cheryl's hand was up before mine.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Cheryl, go ahead. Ms. Munson.
And she is on mute.
I can talk now, but I can't see you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I actually was going to ask about reversions, and I'm glad we had this discussion. I certainly think it would be helpful to, when the council hears the PSLIP budget, to have the amount of reversions that we will be discussing next year and figuring out a way to manage these as a 10-year plan. I think that report needs to come to the full county council, accompanied by the amount of revenue collected so far as reversions. Otherwise, the county council will also feel like this is another Groundhog Day operation. So I wanted to ask also about overtime. And I'm looking at the packet now and I see 197,000 proposed for 2022. And in 2021, it was 120,000. So I don't understand why the spreadsheet says 77,000 increase, because it was because not all the overtime is likely to have been used. In any case, could Ms. Hensley tell us about how much of the overtime has been used to date in the 2021 budget?
I don't have that in front of me right now, but I can, let's see.
Okay, so I
Might
guess
take me a minute.
okay, that'd be great. I think it's telling that we would need additional overtime as well as additional staff. And that's that is what's not making sense to me.
Yes, and the temptation I know is because we've been able to keep our head a little bit above water by doing a minimum of 4 in the room. As we get into this, I know the temptation as we're trying to beef up staffing is when people call in to say, well, we can get by on a minimum of 4. But that doesn't accomplish getting us up to the increased staffing levels that the NOVAC recommends. So,
Okay.
so as we're increasing our minimum staffing, even increasing our total staff, we want to get that minimum up as well. And so that means that we're going to be calling people in and posting overtime in order to not fall back to say, well, they called in, but we can get by on 4.
Okay, thank you.
Did that make sense?
Somewhat.
Okay, in my running spreadsheet, as of May 11th, we had used in overtime 39,750. We were at 20.1% as of May 11th. But it's hard to consider that a good number because as of May, people haven't started taking their vacations and all that. You know, in the spring, people pretty much sit tight. We're covering sick time, but we're not covering a lot of vacation time and requested time off at that point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Munson. Ms. Scambaluri?
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Going back to staffing issues, I kind of geek out on HR stuff sometimes, but you talked about losing a lot of people shortly after we hire them because these bidding wars, so to speak, develop, and other former employers come after them with more money and so forth. What is the average tenure of our dispatch workers? Do you have a sense of that?
I can't tell you an average. I will tell you that one of our dispatchers has been here 43 years. We have two at 40 years. We have one at 31. We have a couple at 18. We have one at 15. And then we have we have kind of a big gap. We have, I think, one at 9, one at 5. And then we have kind of a big gap. And then we have several that I have hired since I have been here.
Okay, that's longer than I thought. Would it be possible, I think we're going to be very interested to see the impact of salary on retention and salary on hiring. So would it be possible, please do track that next year?
Absolutely.
Anecdotally, certainly, but just beyond that, it would be interesting to know. And if I come in as an ordinary person off the street, how long would it take me to get up to speed as a dispatch worker?
To get up to speed, that depends on how you define up to speed. But our training program is 12 to 14 weeks long. And you really don't start getting a comfortable handle on it until about 6 months. And then between 6 months to a year, you're starting to feel more comfortable in it. But I've had people that have said, oh my gosh, I've been here 7 years and today I had this for the first time. And so it's a constant learning process. And as you know, technology changes all the time. So they're constantly having to learn new technology. And every time there's a change, everybody resists change. And so then people are uncomfortable again for a while.
Okay.
So
it would be interesting to me to know, and I'm guessing you don't have this now, but given that that's how long it takes a new person to get up to speed, I'd be interested where we tend to lose them. If we lose them right away before we've invested in training, that's one thing. If we lose them after we've gotten them up to speed, that's kind of another matter. So I'd be interested in any impressions you have now on that, and certainly worth knowing going forward as well. So
I would say it's well spread over the gamut. Since COVID and since you started seeing now hiring signs everywhere, we are losing more before we can even get them in the door. Some people we do lose, maybe not in the classroom portion of the training, but when they start sitting in the room. And so we've adjusted our training plan to where now every week we're trying to give them 2 to 4 hours in the room. Because what happens is when you're learning it in a controlled environment, you know, it's a very comfortable environment, even though you may be hearing it in the training or you may be hearing it on some of the recordings that Karen plays in the training process. When they are in that room and hear it live happening to somebody and it's a bad call, we lose a lot of people on the first bad call.
this is helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll look forward to learning more as time goes on.
Thank you, Ms. Gambolari. Mr. Sims?
Thank you. I think this is my final question, and maybe I missed it, maybe this was said, but what is our current staff level with dispatch? And whatever we have, then we're asking for 3 more. So I guess I'd like to know, what is our current staffing level?
You know, I just had to answer that question not too long ago.
I'm sorry, that was today and I missed it. I apologize.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. We have, as of today, we have 29 full-time telecommunicator positions and 6 supervisor positions and 2 management positions. We just lost another supervisor for medical reasons. And so we are down to 3 current supervisors and we have 19 telecommunicators. Well, I take that back. That was before this hire group that we started July 26th. And we were able to pick up 5 people on July 26th.
Were all of those in the telecommunicators?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're
Thank you.
getting ready to post to hire 2 supervisors.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Any other committee member wish to question or discuss, give a shout, because I may not be able to see you all on the same screen at the same time. Are we good? All right, Mr. Lucas. Oh, so sorry.
Cheryl had her hand raised.
Oh, I missed it. So sorry. Ms. Munson.
It's hard to see that raised hand symbol on my background, so I put my hand up.
There you
Thank
go.
you for this additional question. I wanted to ask about longevity, and if this is a factor for retention. Do you have a longevity program? I don't see it in the budget.
I'm not sure what you mean by a longevity program.
Okay.
Are you saying, go ahead.
So in county government, longevity is awarded with increased years of service to county government. And I don't know if the city has this type of annual bonus, but I think longevity has been helpful in recognizing the longtime workers, and they are rewarded for their continuing employment with the county. So do you have any comments on that?
We do not have a longevity plan.
Okay. Does the city have a longevity plan in other departments?
I can jump in on that, Ms. Munson. For individuals who are part of our collective bargaining units, sometimes they negotiate longevity plans. For dispatchers or other folks who aren't part of a collective bargaining unit, we don't have longevity bonuses beyond, of course, as those annual percentage increases start to add up. Individuals who have been here longer, of course, and have more experience are making more than those who are just newly joining the city and don't have as much experience. So, but we don't have any payment beyond sort of that built-in structure for paying people who have more experience more because they've been around.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you, Ms. Munson. If there are no further questions, I'm going to ask Mr. Lucas to help me formulate a motion if we are indeed done discussing this section.
Yes, I think in the past years, the committee has considered a motion to simply adopt the dispatch budget as presented. The total amount, again, that they are requesting from the PS Lit revenue is $2,913,929.22.
Do I have a motion from one of the committee members to that effect?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
All right. Shall we go to public comment now, Mr. Lucas? Or do we wait till the end?
I think going to the public now would make sense, although I don't see any public on the meeting. So,
all right. Should there be any person from the public who wishes to make a comment on our motion and our adoption of these rates, please raise your hand, send a note to Mr. Lucas through chat, and we will recognize you and you can make your comments. So I guess we'll just wait for a minute or 10 seconds since there's no public on there. All right. Would you like to call a roll or should I?
Please go ahead.
Mr. McKim,
Yes.
Ms. Munson,
Yes.
Mr. Sims,
Yes.
Ms. Scambaluri,
Yes.
Ms. Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
and this is Mr. Smith. Yes. So I believe that's adopted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. Is that correct?
Well, I
Todd is here.
do believe Mr. Odom has joined us. Yes.
Oh,
He went
Yes,
at the initial roll call.
I apologize for that. I was tied up, unfortunately, but I vote yes.
thank you, Mr. Odom. All right, that means we get with 7-0. So thank you very much. That passed. And that will be forwarded to the Monroe County Tax Council, to the full committee. All right, now it looks like what we do is we have the next section is remaining revenues are distributed via public safety, local income tax, certified shares in 2020 to the 4-member jurisdictions composing the Lit Council. And is there, Mr. Lucas, are you going to chat about that or anybody else from the city?
Yes, again, we've largely covered it. And this year, I know this will seem a little redundant given that you just adopted a budget for the dispatch center. But just as a reminder, that amount of money that you just approved for dispatch comes out of the total revenue from the PS Lit. The remaining amount, which based on the state's revenue estimate would be about $6,111,753. That gets distributed via certified shares to the 4 units of government automatically. Just a note that this year the committee did not receive any applications from any qualifying service providers for any funding. So in past years, you all have reviewed and in some years awarded funding to qualifying service providers that then needs to be approved. But this year there were no applications. And so the remaining amount of money will simply flow to the 4 units of government. So I do think if the committee would like to consider a motion to approve this table, and this is what would be forwarded to the members of the Monroe County Tax Council for their consideration. And again, this committee makes a recommendation to the Tax Council. In past years, the Bloomington City Council, as a member of the Tax Council, has introduced an ordinance for action by the full Tax Council. Typically in October, there is a window between essentially September 1st and October 31st, where the Tax Council can adjust distributions and rates and have that modification take effect January 1st of the next year. So that's the background. I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, I think the committee today can consider a motion to approve this table of rates and forward this to the Tax Council. And I see at least one question for Mr. McKim.
I was going to say, if there are questions regarding this section, please raise your hand. Mr. McKim.
I'm sorry, could you put that spreadsheet back up on the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to see how you were. Okay, so you did adjust the percentages. No, you did not adjust. You basically used the same percentages as last year. You didn't attempt to use the property tax footprints for this year, because that information is known. We should be able to.
I did reach out to our controller's office, and at his recommendation, he said use last year's figures. These will change. And he wasn't able to provide those. So I did use last year's as an estimate. These boxes here will again change, and this is based on a formula that Mr. McKim may be able to explain better than I can, but it's based on a state formula that's calculated.
Yeah, it's basically property tax footprint. But okay, I just want to make sure we were all clear that the 2022 numbers or distribution percentages are just copied over from 2021, and that those numbers will actually be calculated based on the 2021 property taxes.
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, I meant to mention that.
Anyone else have a question or comment regarding this adoption? All right. So, yeah, I will then, I guess, ask again if there's anyone in the public who wishes to make a comment. Please raise your hand and or send Mr. Lucas a note through chat, and we will recognize you and you'll have time to comment. And anybody else in the public clamoring to make a comment? All right, then I will ask for a Mr. McKim.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Smith. Actually, I just wanted to clarify what exactly we're voting on, since these numbers are, since this is basically the law. We're not actually making a decision here.
We have to legally adopt it.
Well,
Is that
you may not. This may be a redundant motion. I agree. In past years, there's been beyond the dispatch budget, there's been the amount recommended to go to the qualifying service providers. If you'd like to forego a motion, you're absolutely correct that this will happen as Mr. McKim stated, by operation of law. So again, this committee in past years has forwarded, I think, the spreadsheet to each member of the tax council, just as a written record of what you considered and what you were looking at. So I'm happy to just do that if the committee would like.
what's the committee's preference? Anybody have a comment? Mr. McKim, go ahead.
I think Mr. Sims, did he have his hand up?
So I may have missed you, Jim. Oh,
No, I did
okay.
not. Just waving at my wife as she goes on her morning walk. So,
Okay.
thank you, Jeff.
If we're not required to do it,
Yeah.
then it is just redundant, and I don't see the need to do it unless we have some statutory requirement or regulatory requirement. Okay.
This was mostly in keeping with the committee's past practice, and I agree with Mr. McKim. It's probably redundant. So.
Okay. Well, then that's great. Then that will get forwarded on to the full committee. And any other business or final comments, Mr. Lucas? Any other thing that we need to think about?
Not that I need to bring up. I believe you all mentioned wanting to not wait until next year's process to hear from the city and the county on dispatch reserves. So I doubt the committee is ready to pick a date for that today. So we can certainly work on that in the coming months and reach out to you all.
Yeah, can you do me a favor and put something on your calendar for a few months hence, or some question to ask maybe Mr. Rooker, that are you guys ready, or do you want to do it? Just so we don't forget about it and it goes on and then we get a surprise in next year.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Can I jump in real quick? Can
Yes,
I
ma'am.
request that we get, if we don't already have them, if the controller hasn't given like financials that show the reversions, Mike, if you guys already have that, can you pass those along to us here at the county? Or if you don't have them, can we get those within they should be fairly easy reports to generate. Can you maybe get them in the next week or two?
Is that a Mr. Rooker question?
I don't know. Rooker, yeah, I guess it's a Rooker question.
Yeah, and I can respond to that real quick. So we have Angie and Jeff Cockrell have that report as well. They had some questions about that report. So we are going to, as I said, that's one of the things we're going to work through in the next few weeks, but you should be able to get it from them. I can also forward you a copy of it as well, Margie.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Rice. Any other comments for the good of the order? Okay, well, I hereby say that we're adjourned And thank you all very much for the great discussion. And thank you, city staff and Mr. Lucas for your help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You all.